Despairing over life in Washington, go watch a high school basketball game. Half a lifetime ago, Paul Norris's oldest son Shawn joined the Chantilly High basketball team. Paul had something of a big mouth at the time, and he figured the best way to stop himself from blurting out something he would regret was to land an official role, so I decided to come to the table where I could watch the game and not say anything. He joked Tuesday night, a few minutes before beginning his 26th consecutive year keeping the official scorebook for the Chargers. His children are now adults, and Shawn coaches big men for the varsity team, meaning he sits a few chairs down from his dad's perch. Paul lives in the same house he has been in for 36 years, maybe 3 blocks away from the school his 6 kids once walked to. And father and son are still regulars in that purple-splashed gym dotted with signs advertising athletic department boosters such as Elhady Orthodontics and Doherty Plumbing. "It's home," Shawn Norris said, when I asked why he's still here. "I've been here 6 days a week for 20 years, basically." That's a perfectly quotidian high school sports tale, one repeated in hundreds or maybe thousands of gyms across the country. Tuesday night was just a normal season opening night in suburban D.C., the young Chargers struggling with visiting South County, parents in the home stands entreating them to rebound or pick and roll or make their free throws, chanting teens in NBA jerseys registering their support in a modest student section, the losing team later sharing laughs and pizza in the team room as the ad stacked folding chairs and moved Gatorade coolers. Whatever this was, it didn't feel like Babylon. I went to Chantilly because of a modest essay that made the rounds last week, one decrying life in modern D.C. Babylon revisited, melancholy thoughts after a short trip to Washington, D.C. It was written by a journalism legend, longtime post-military correspondent Thomas E. Ricks, whose professional career was conducted at the highest levels of official Washington and centered on topics infinitely more serious and disturbing than a Chantilly loss to South County. Ricks explained in the piece why he moved to Maine, burned out from the stresses of Washington, from the disturbing results of governmental actions, from feeling like every day was like climbing into the boxing ring for another few rounds. A recent visit to the district reminded him why he'd left. As I walked around Capitol Hill, watching the conservatively attired young staffers hurry to and fro, the prevailing mode of those associated with Congress's small-town bank branch president, planning their next moves, the thought occurred to me, this is no longer my city. I didn't enjoy it at all. It wasn't just disoriented, I was alienated. I'd see the staffers chuckle as they walked and I would think, what are you people doing? What events will break your hearts? There's not much point in arguing over this. People feel what they feel. People live where they want to live. You can't tell someone to like a place they don't, especially if it's touched by bad memories. And yet it's the kind of paragraph that always makes me reflexively defensive. The suggestion that a sprawling, diverse and massive region should be defined by those conservatively attired young staffers, who operate in a tiny sliver of our town, doing business that's foreign to almost all of us. I probably used to share some of those complaints myself, until I got a job covering high school sports. It forced me to get my first car, my parents' old minivan, really, and to start driving to places I'd never heard of as a 22-year-old transplant on Capitol Hill, Waldorf and Dunkirk, Burtonsville and Damascus, Purcellville and Sterling and Herndon and Chantilly. I'm sure I learned lots of lessons, like where all the local Kinkos were, and just how many suburban strip malls had great ethnic restaurants, but the main lesson was more important, that even amid massive population growth, vast swaths of this area are made up of regular communities with regular high schools hosting regular events, a world away from young staffers planning their next moves. My first thought on reading Ricks's piece was that I wanted to go to a high school game, to see if it still felt the same way, and maybe not to St. Albans or Sidwell Friends. So there I was at Chantilly on Tuesday night, 18 miles from the White House, in a building filled with kids in Redskins and Wizards gear, chatting with Thomas McHugh. He moved from Cuba to the D.C. area when he was 5, was raised in Tacoma Park, played under legendary high school coach Joe Gallagher at St. John's, and eventually moved to western Fairfax County, where his son Kendall starts for the Chargers. After the game he caught up with John Imperial, another parent, who grew up in Silver Spring, has lived,